All right, folks, let me tell you a little bit about Daniel Louwrens. You'll see his picture on the screen over there. He's graduated with a degree in natural science from UWC. This happened in 2019, and he's only been building his muscles from there. He's already worked in the supplement industry for quite some time, and he's quickly switched to coaching locals and internationals, ranging from strengthening up athletes to the general public. He's been working in the fitness industry now for over a decade and has helped more than 200 individuals reach their personal goals. He became a vegetarian, largely, I'm told, so he could save some money while at university because it was cheaper to do that, and then became a full vegan for a very ridiculous reason. Believe it or not, it's because somebody dared him. Somebody said to him that he wasn't able to build muscles becoming only a vegan and eating only vegetables. So he went ahead and proved them wrong. He currently competes in bodybuilding competitions. This man stands 1.94 meters tall, and his weight fluctuates between 115 and 130 kilograms, depending on his goals at that particular moment. So this is a Q&A session. It's going to be led by ProVeg SA's country director, Donovan Wool. He'll be speaking to Daniel, and there will be time for questions and answers afterwards. So a big round of applause for these two gents, Daniel and Wool. Can you guys tell which one is the bodybuilder?
Thank you, Bobby. I'm really excited to be speaking to Daniel and sharing some of his wisdom. I have tried to put on muscle like he has, but obviously I did it when I was eating lots of meat and it didn't really work. So maybe he will give me some advice today. I want to start with the very first question that I always get asked when people find out that I'm vegan. Where do you get your protein from?
It's pretty easy. Everything and most things that we get at the shop has protein in it. It's as simple as turning the package around and seeing what's in it. So I get my protein from a lot of carbohydrate sources because I eat a lot of carbs. You start with the carbs and choose the ones that have more protein in them. So oats is pretty high in protein, so it's in pasta is the same. Rice is low. And then you look at your vegan sources of protein, so tempeh, seitan, things like that, and obviously protein shakes.
Okay, great. And then a lot of people will be like, okay, fine. We understand that you can get enough protein to survive, but it's really difficult to get enough protein to grow big muscles. So obviously you got really big muscles. How does that work? Is there a misconception around the difference between plant protein and animal protein in terms of growing big muscles? So if you want to just talk a little bit about how it's possible as a vegan to grow really big muscles.
Again, it just takes a tiny bit of research. So you just look at what the protein consists of in regards to amino acids. So 9 essential amino acids, we need them to grow muscle. The body can take those 9 and turn them into the rest that are non-essential amino acids. And so, for instance, if you consume only one vegan source of protein and it doesn't have all 9, you're going to lead to a tricky situation. So you just make sure you get all 9 amino acids, and then the digestibility, bioavailability, make sure you choose options that are high. And then you learn how to cook those in different ways.
Okay, so it really isn't as difficult as people make it out to be.
No, you just have to have a really big appetite. If you want to push it to the extreme, people have a misconception just how much you have to eat to grow a lot of muscle. So currently 4,000-5,000 calories most days.
And so, yeah, I think that's a big thing. At the extremes is very different to what the average person needs. So maybe if you can just tell us, I mean, you're also a personal trainer. So for someone who's looking to just exist healthily, and then someone who's trying to put on a little bit more muscle, maybe doing a little bit of sport, and then someone who's at your level, how much protein do you need a day? Like how many grams per kilogram of body weight?
So we use the grams per kilogram just because that's the most accurate way that we can measure. And for an everyday individual, 0.8 grams per kilogram, because they just need to keep a positive nitrogen balance to replace the small muscle that they lose per day and for hormone production. From there, the person goes to the gym, just wants to build a bit of lean muscle, is looking at around, I would say 1.5 to 2 grams, but towards that 2 grams is pushing it. And that's where we start coming in, so 2 to 3 grams up until 4 grams, depending on what your goal is.
So zero point 0.8 is enough for the average person.
Absolutely.
And that's really not a huge amount. So if you weigh 80 kilograms, then that's 56 grams of protein a day. No. So that's really, really not that hard to do. Then I want to ask you sort of your experience, how you felt. I mean, you told me earlier that you haven't been vegan your whole life. So maybe how you felt as an athlete before you went vegan, and then what sort of benefits you saw as a bodybuilder and as just in your personal life, health-wise.
Right, so the very first thing that I can say is digestibility. When you consume a lot of animal products and a ton of food, digestibility is not great. Switching to plant foods does make it a lot easier. It is that fiber microbiome exceptional. From there, I saw a reduction in cholesterol, reduction in blood pressure, a reduction in a inflammation marker called C-reactive protein. And those are all going to help me just live better, live longer, and train harder, and make life a ton easier. Because people like, oh, how does high cholesterol feel? Well, you don't feel it. It's just too late one day. But if you have better blood pressure, more blood can get to the muscles, so you can work out harder, more oxygen gets there. And so I think those things are not just apparent in your training, but in everyday life as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. The next question I want to ask is about the people that you train. So when you have athletes come in and they're eating a lot of meat, or if they're already vegan, sort of what is your stance on advice that you give them around what they should be eating for optimal muscle building?
So we look at what their current situation is. We don't just give blank advice. We look at what the situation is, and we look at the science. We find the middle ground. And then we look if they have any dysfunctions, particular protein sources. So for instance, if someone struggles to digest protein A, ask your family. Usually a lot of other people struggle to digest that as well. And so we eliminate that, or if they feel like one meal is not digesting great, we identify what it is and remove it, and then we start introducing healthier alternatives depending on what their goals are and depending where they want to go. So I don't give blank advice. We look at an individual and say, how can I make it best for this individual, rather than saying, it's what I do, you need to do exactly the same.
Okay, awesome. So you're also, I know you're not someone who pushes veganism for like a lot of people would push it and say you have to be vegan, otherwise you're a murderer. So, do you want to talk a little bit how you got into it? I know Bobby mentioned it, so maybe tell that story.
So I was a vegetarian in college to save money, and I figured eggs were a lot cheaper than meat, so I ate a lot of eggs. And then I can't remember where it was, but we were sitting, and my friend was like, "It's a good thing you still have eggs and milk because you couldn't do it as vegan." And I said, "Bet." And so it's a few years later, and I'm still doing it, and it's fun. It's interesting. I do feel better. The digestion is a big thing. When you eat that much, it helps a lot to have good digestion. And when you're cutting and you don't need exceptional digestion, a lot of veggies, very high in fiber, exceptional for health. And when I look at my blood markers, which we do every 6 months, it's really nice to see that you can still make progress and have the health benefits without running too many of the risks of being big, because being big isn't healthy. When you're big, your heart struggles and everything. So veganism is one of the tools that we have to try and eliminate the risks of being big.
And how have you seen other people in the industry, other bodybuilders, the response that you've got when people find out that you're vegan? Are they still surprised? Are more people trying this?
I wouldn't say more people are trying it, but they're trying vegan sources. So maybe once or twice a day, they'll go for a vegan protein to help digestion. A lot of people are finding milk doesn't agree with them. Even when they go the hydroisolate route, which is the safer route for digestion, it still doesn't work. So they'll go for the vegan route. More veggies, always great. And then for myself, a lot of people are still surprised because I don't talk about it a lot. I guess I don't wear vegan clothes, like vegan branded or anything. But when they find me on Instagram, like, oh, I didn't realize you were vegan. And then they ask usually, how do you do it and stuff? Oh, I could never do it. And then you just like, no, you could. It's just, you have to take like 10 minutes every month to just decide which proteins you want to use.
So you don't really miss meat? You're not like, wow, how can I not eat it because it tastes so nice?
No, it's when I go home to, because I'm from Namibia, then the people like, because in Namibia, chicken is a vegetable.
Yeah.
So there the people are still like, oh, you can't do it. I'm like, well, I'm still stronger than you, so apparently I can. But there it's a culture thing, but over here, no, I don't miss it. It's everyone is accepting of it. No one really, quote unquote, bullies me.
Great. And then I think another thing that I come across often is people who say, I'm eating all of this protein, but I'm not putting on muscle. So obviously, I think some people assume that if you eat a lot more protein, you'll naturally just have more muscle. Can you explain how that's a fallacy and that you actually have to do something to grow the muscle? And what do you have to do?
So there's a tiny bit of evidence that eating slightly more protein can help with fat loss and growing a bit of muscle. But the muscle is kind of like growing up. You have to go under pressure to develop. You have to go through rough times to actually develop and grow. And so the idea for progressive overload, which is in the gym, you use a 10 kilogram dumbbell this week, next week it's 11, then 12, and etc. So every week the muscle is introduced into a new stimulus and goes, wow, I need to adjust because this guy's going back tomorrow. And so you stress it, you provide it the nutrition, and then you sleep, and then the muscle grows. But eating more protein is definitely healthy, and there are studies to show it, but it won't magically make you grow a ton of muscle.
And so for people who aren't looking to get really big muscles, but they just want to maybe have stronger legs so that they can run further, are there still going to be benefits for eating a plant-based diet?
Absolutely. So when we look at long-distance runners or athletes in general, cardiovascular health definitely is correlated to cholesterol and blood pressure. And those are the two big things that we see with veganism that could potentially bring it down because of the high fiber, because of less saturated fats. And there is a tiny bit of evidence that heme protein, which is the animal protein, has been linked to certain cancers, which is obviously a big risk. But for athletes especially, that lower cardiovascular risk is going to allow them to train harder for longer and have a longer lifespan as an athlete. Those two are the leading causes of dysfunction in the States and in the world. So I think that's one of the big things for athletes.
Cool. And then when I think about protein and when I see what bodybuilders would usually be using, or when I go to the gym and I see the guy with his protein shake after gym, it's usually a protein shake. And if it's not a vegan, and most of the people I see aren't vegan, it's whey protein, because that's a really easy way to get protein. But then when I have a conversation and I say, well, it's so easy to just switch to soy protein. And then I get this look going, whoa, how can you be promoting soy protein? It's going to give you man boobs, it's going to mess with your hormones. What sort of evidence have you seen that eating too much soy or soy protein isolate or tempeh or anything like this is going to cause hormonal issues in men?
In men, zero. I know there's some evidence that pregnant women and women going through breast cancer need to watch out, but zero. The phytoestrogens found in beer are stronger and more prevalent, so there's no real evidence that soy is going to give you gynecomastia or is it a good protein source. I still advise that you don't just use soy as your protein source, but it's a perfectly good protein source.
Okay, cool. And then for the people who really do love meat, there are these meat replacement products. What is your thought about eating those to grow muscle and eating those just in general?
So meat replacement products can be good, but the more processed it is and the more it's supposed to be like a fast food, it should be kept to a minimum at least if you were extreme. But I do understand that most people don't want to build to weigh 150. And so I understand the idea that having a burger that's not made of actual meat is great. You throw it on the grill and you just have a good time. But if you've made that decision, you want to push to how far you can, then we typically want to go for protein sources that aren't meat alternatives per se. You can still do seitan, but just make your own, because then you can control every single aspect that goes in there. Or you buy something that's a lot less refined, a lot less additives, because when you're trying to be in the top 5% of the world, the 5% in your diet matters.
So are you eating very clean yourself? Sort of what would clean look like? Are you eating things like bread? Just maybe explain exactly what very clean and extreme, what your view on that is.
So again, extreme clean is controlling every single aspect of every single day. And again, it's not something that's sustainable. You have to think about, okay, can I do this for 6, 12, 18 weeks, etc.? But clean for me is pretty much as low saturated fats as you can get, zero trans fats. Running a very high carbohydrate diet, there's a lot of evidence that high carbs is far better for muscle gain and performance than a high-fat diet. And then eating 350 grams of protein per day. I don't eat bread unless I'm like having a special occasion, but you plan for that. But typically at the moment, it's like 4 or 5 protein shakes a day, like a kilogram of seitan, 2-3 kilograms of sweet potato, oats. It gets a lot. And then you sometimes have a drink while you train as well.
So that's a lot of food, but obviously that's an extreme athlete in the same way that you would spend a lot more time in the gym than other athletes, or the same way that a professional cyclist would spend an insane amount of time on a bicycle. So for the average person, if they're starting out and they want to they just want to focus on some muscle, maybe if you can break it down to also on age. Is age a big factor? You know, someone who's 18 years old and is looking for some more muscle for rugby versus someone who's 65 and has noticed that their muscle mass is just decreasing. What would you recommend on a weekly basis in terms of some foods to make sure you're trying to get in, and then kind of a few exercises, different kinds of exercises that different people should be doing to grow muscle?
So the age thing, absolutely everyone should be training. There's a lot of evidence that as we age, muscle deteriorates, and that spills over into bone tissue. And so when we start having bone issues, we start having breakages, osteoporosis. So we really want to make sure that we train, because training releases a hormone called IGF-1 that binds to the bone tissue and causes an increase in bone density. So another thing for age is, as we get older, our bodies get pretty crap digesting amino acids. So we need more protein. So that 0.8 becomes 1.1 gram as we go past the age of around 45. And from there, the person who's 18, exercises that you should be doing, there's not specific exercise, but specific movements. So we're doing a lower body squat movement, because you're going to be going to the toilet up until age 80. So you want to be squatting through your whole life, because you're going to be doing it. An upper body pulling movement and upper body pushing movement, all great for the shoulders. And then making sure your lower back is pretty healthy. So not specific exercises, no exercise is essential, but you should be doing a squat movement, so like a squat, leg press, front squat, pull-ups, great, any pulling movement, upper back, and then an upper body push movement, and then of course core movements. And as we age, that just becomes a bit more precise, like what's going to work for you, what are your dysfunctions. So for instance, if I use my own mother as an example, she's having a lot of lower back issues, so she would spend more time on that, doing more, not weight training, but specifically just managing her own body weight. And so that will eventually progress. And again, it's not a blank answer, it's kind of what's individual for you. And I think that's a problem maybe with veganism. People think it's just a blanket. It's like, oh, you don't eat meat, you can't do anything. It's like, no, we're still individuals with individual diet approaches.
And then in terms of how often should an average person be working out? And again, maybe someone who just wants to stay healthy, someone who wants to have a little bit more muscle, and then a bodybuilder like yourself.
So someone who's just trying to stay healthy, I would say 1 or 2 resistance training sessions per week. And
how long a session?
At least 20 up until 50. Okay. And then at least 2 cardiovascular sessions per week. It doesn't have to be high intensity. Low intensity cardio is perfectly fine. Then someone who's slightly step up from that can push it to 4 times per week. Still doing also cardio, but they might do weight training and cardio on the same day. And then pushing to the extreme, sometimes we train 15, 16 times a week.
Wow. Yeah. How many hours would that be?
So when I'm getting close for a show, like on the like in the photo, I would do 2 hours of cardio in the morning, an hour and a half of lifting at night, and another 45 minutes of cardio after lifting as well.
Wow. And then one last question before we go to Q&As. You mentioned cardio a lot. So when I speak to the guys who I used to know in bodybuilding, cardio was like a swear word for bodybuilders. Can you just explain how cardio benefits you in general health, and then also what it does with your bodybuilding?
So one of the big reasons why we do a lot of cardio is when you get really big, you get unfit. And if you're doing squats and by rep 8, you're like, oh, I have to stop. Why? Because my lungs can't keep up. So your legs can still go, okay, you're hindering growth. That's a big thing. Secondly is health. When we're talking about high intensity weight training, the left part of your heart gets quite rigid and it doesn't become very malleable. And that's a problem because it should be. And low intensity cardio keeps it elastic, which is essential. And then also just for general health, keeping your arteries clean, being able to live and walk. It's all nice being big, And I've been this weight before, and then when I tied my shoes, I would be out of breath, and I wasn't doing cardio. So this time around, when I'm trying to push my weights, I'm still doing 15 minutes of cardio a day, but I sit at a chair the entire day. So you have to, again, you look at what you're doing, but cardio is perfectly healthy for everyone, unless you're like the teenage guy at 16 years old who eats McDonald's 4 times a day and still has abs.
Yeah.
Maybe cardio isn't the best idea for you, but again, it's about individuality.
Okay, awesome. I think before we go to questions, if we can just give Daniel a quick round of applause. And then if Bobby can walk around with the microphone, if anyone has any questions.
Any questions from anybody? Any hands? Right up front. Here we go. I'll get to you next. Go ahead.
Hi there, Daniel. Do you supplement? Do you take B12 supplements, especially B12? Do you do those supplements?
Yes, I do take supplements. I don't take B12 because I drink a lot of energy drinks. Yes, so energy drinks, surprisingly, have a lot of B12 in them, and the liver has an ability to store B12 for months. So if you take a bolus of B12, it doesn't go to waste like all the other vitamins, it stays. So I do take supplements, yes. I take omega-3 fatty acids, vegan of course. I take a multivitamin, I take a lot of iron, because you have to be it's essential. And then obviously your creatine. Creatine is a great supplement for vegans and vegetarians because we don't get creatine from animal sources, and they did a study comparing creatine levels in the brain versus the body in meat eaters and vegetarians. They had the same amount of creatine in the brains, but the muscles were different, which means that the brain has first dibs over creatine, and creatine has been shown to aid not only in muscle growth and bone health, but in mental function as well.
Yeah,
so creatine is one of the best supplements that we can take. And there's virtually no side effects to creatine. It's not bad for the kidneys.
Excellent. All right. Next question up here. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for all of that. I'd like to know, I want us to get specific because as you can see, there's mostly women in here. And you touched on the dangers of using soy. But I want you to actually go into it because your audience is mostly women. So what should we be looking for when we're looking for a vegan shake that is safe for us and won't cause any kinds of diseases?
Again, I think the studies, I might be misquoting, but I think the studies were looking at dysfunctional women per se, that they already had issues to start with. So they were suffering from breast cancer, or they were pregnant, and obviously when women go through pregnancy, there's a lot of hormonal shift, and so it becomes very, very fine, and then introducing certain exogenous hormones or isoflavones can mess things up. That said, other great options is going to be a gluten-based seitan. Seitan is a great option. Surprisingly enough, gluten is a whole wheat protein. Seitan is the gluten in bread. So they isolate that, and then you can kind of make it into a vegan alternative meat. And you boil it in a certain broth, and it gets that flavor. And then you can store it in the fridge, and when you want to cook it, you just cut it up and cook it in the manner that you wish. So that's a great option. And we're looking at protein shakes. I know a certain company, I don't know if I'm allowed to say company names, but let's not. Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know USN, their protein shake has watermelon and pumpkin seeds as the protein base. I don't know why anyone hasn't done this, but potato isolate protein has 20 grams of protein per 20 gram serving, and it's a full amino acid protein. I don't know why anyone isn't making it.
Yeah, it is strange because some fortified foods use potato protein, but I've never seen it in a protein shake.
So I know it's available in the UK, but we can't get it for some reason. And then again, for women who aren't training, they don't need that much protein. So look at your carbohydrate sources. Look where you can quote unquote steal protein as best as you can. And then when we start pushing the limits, then we start looking at alternatives, so like protein shakes, great. And then you just have to look at what's in the container. And if you personally have a dysfunction against soy, then you start looking at alternatives. I think it's incorrect to say that women have a problem with soy. It's individual people that have a problem with soy.
I think that's just to butt in there. I think it's really important you keep mentioning carbs. So I think a lot of people, and I was definitely one of them when I used to play rugby and I wanted more muscles, I would count my protein only from what I thought were protein sources. So I'd be eating potatoes, and I'd be eating oats, and I'd be eating these other things that we think of as starches, and I wouldn't be counting those grams, even though, as you said, there can be a reasonable amount of protein in there.
Another question over here.
I'm 73. What exercise do you recommend to keep your muscle firm and flexible?
So we would first need to look if you are capable of doing all the regular movements, so squatting and overhead push and things like that. And then you can just do every movement at the gym. There's no specific movement that'll necessarily hinder flexibility. That's a misconception. People like me are very inflexible because we don't do flexibility issues, but there's no studies to show that muscle mass leads to a decrease in flexibility. So I would definitely look at just slowly incorporating resistance training exercises, general exercise in the gym, and I would stick to machines, because the machines are going to keep you, yes, they keep you locked in a position, but you don't need to worry about dropping a weight or accidentally misgrooving a rep and then popping a shoulder or something like that. And so once you've progressed and you start feeling a bit better, more comfortable in that, then you can also look at maybe incorporating some free weights, which would, in a wrong term, but it would work the little muscles in the shoulders per se, which is going to help you just stay stabilized in your daily life, and to keep it firm, diet and lose a bit of fat.
There you go. You got another question over here.
Hi, I have a question about protein shakes. So I'm not ever going to be as big as you or have any, I do weight training 3 times a week. It's not, my main goal is not to pick up muscle or a lot of muscle. I find that my question is, do you think if I eat largely a whole foods diet, do you think I need a supplement with protein shakes if I don't really enjoy taking them? I find that, and this could be anecdotal, but I find that if I use them every time I train or afterwards, I pick up like bulky weights. I don't know if that makes any sense. And I prefer not to take them. Do you think that I could get all of my protein requirements just from a whole foods?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Depending, again, if you are pushing way past what I think you are going for, then you might need them. But from what I can gather, no, you don't need them. So you would simply, you could use an app. There's an app called Fat Secret. It's got South African food. So if you type in SPAR, all the SPAR foods pop up. If you type in Woolworths, the same. So that's the app that I use, and if I'm designing a new diet for a client or someone, I look at what they tell me. So for instance, if I have someone saying that they don't want to eat protein shakes, I would say, okay, so we're going to get all our protein from our food. So you would track your food for a day. Okay, I'm missing 20 grams of protein from where I want to be, and then you would look, what small adjustments can I make, or can I just eat more?
All right, we'll fit in one more question over here.
Hey, just a quick question. What would you recommend in terms of protein shakes to get all 9 amino acids? Because I've noticed a lot of them out there are just isolates. And in terms of getting the complete package, do you have any recommendations, or what do you use personally?
So the term isolate doesn't necessarily mean it's isolated amino acids. It just means it's been refined to make it digest better. So when they say pea protein isolate, it's just kind of a marketing term, because pea protein is already isolated, in my opinion. It comes from the whey protein isolate. So whey protein is the milk derivative, and isolate has less carbs, less fat, and digests easier. It's also a lot more watery. But anyways, I'm a very, very big fan of the USN one. It's definitely a good one. I'm also a really big fan of any combines different kinds of protein sources. So if you look at, for instance, it's the brown pot at Dischem. It's got a soy protein. I wouldn't stick to just that because it's one kind of protein source. I wouldn't stick to that entire day. You don't have to eat all 9 every single time you eat. You just have to get all 9 throughout the day, and good amounts. So for instance, I would say 75% of your diet needs to have all 9, because again, your body can change those amino acids and fall where they need to be. But those two, that's a very good option, the USN one. Biogen also has a very, very, very good one. And then, unfortunately, a lot of the imported stuff from the States, A bit more expensive, but those are also great options to go for. But again, just twist the pot and see do they use more than one protein source, and if they do, typically it's going to be a complete amino acid profile.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, folks. Look at this man. Obviously, it works for him. Thank you, Daniel Louwrens. Thank you for leading the discussion. Donovan Wool, the ProVeg SA Country Director. I think that was extremely informative, very, very insightful. And you can always catch up with them afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next discussion is going to start at 2:15, everybody. That's 2:15, McCain Foods, good food. This is also going to be a panel discussion, and that happens from 2:15.